Hi, my name's Ruth. I'm the Young Adults Pastor and Creative Director here at Newlife Pomona. Today I'm going to be sharing our Wednesday word from this week's readings. So we read Acts 17 to Acts 23. I feel like I say this every time, but I loved these chapters. I love this passage. I love the book of Acts and I love Paul's heart. And this season is really an incredible one because it's kind of as cheesy as it is to say, this season for Paul and for the believers in the early church, this really was a season of the best of times and the worst of times. They were seeing these remarkable miracles, like when the guy falls out of the window and dead, and Paul just goes over and raises them from the dead, like it's nothing, just the power of God is moving so remarkably in this season. And I can't even imagine the level of excitement, the level of miracles, and they're moving in a moment where they just have to bring the handkerchiefs to Paul and then to people, and people are healed and remarkable miracles are breaking out. They're in this amazing, powerful, exciting, incredible season. And not only is there power breaking out in their community, this power is breaking out throughout the earth. It says that throughout Asia, the gospel went even through into Europe. And east and west, the gospel is being spread. And it's an incredible season. But we also know for them personally, these were people, right? These were men and women with a nature just like yours, just like mine. And these people are in a season where Paul consistently, place after place, they're trying to kill him. They're trying to shut him down. They're calling him a heretic. They're questioning his motives. They're questioning his intentions. They're trying to shut him out and run him out of cities. He's going through trial after trial and trauma after trauma. Their friends are being martyred. There's all of this craziness happening on a personal level in this season for the early church. And so it's this really remarkable tension that they're living in of the best of times and the worst of times. And in that context, in that moment of the best of times and the worst of times, we pick up this story in chapter 17. And many theologians have talked about this amazing answer that Paul gives, where he shares where they're trying to shut him down, because they're selling these idols in the temple of Diana, and Paul calls them idols and tells them that it's wrong and shuts this down, and they are very offended because they recognize we're losing trade. People used to want these idols, now they don't want them because the world is believing in this God that Paul preaches, and so they're angry with him. And Paul comes back and he gives this masterful answer where he talks about the unknown God. And there's much that could be said about the unknown God. There's much that could be said about the answer that Paul gives them in this season. But the thing that really hits my heart and that I think is remarkable in this passage is not just what Paul says. It's not even how Paul says it. It's not just, the conviction and the zeal with which he speaks, although of course he does. And I don't know about you, but I think of that as Paul. For me, that characterizes Paul's preaching, is this passion and this zeal and this conviction. But Paul, the thing that really hits my heart is Paul is so moved by deep love for God. He speaks with actually a lot of compassion when he says, you are worshipping, you have all these idols, you have all these gods, and yet you have these temples to the unknown God. And without realizing it, you're worshipping Yahweh. You're worshipping the God that I preach, that you're getting angry about because you're saying I'm a heretic, but actually you're worshipping him. And I think in this passage, when you hear Paul's heart behind what he speaks, what he's actually saying is, oh, that you would know God. Oh, that you would look up and turn around and see he is compassionate and he's gracious and he's longing for you to know him. And you're longing to know him. You just don't even know it. Would you stop with your distraction? Would you stop with idolatry? Would you turn around and would you look up and see who he is, his heart, his nature? He doesn't have to be unknown to you. He wants to be known, and I am longing that you would know this God. And the thing that hits my heart reading these chapters on the whole is the level of love and vulnerability and compassion with which Paul speaks. Because I grew up in the church. I grew up on, these Sunday school stories, the story of the guy that falls out of the window. I remember that being a favorite as a child. You hear a lot about Paul and this fiery preacher, and I grew up around a lot of these stories. And if you'd have asked me, describe a man of love, describe someone whose motivation in the Bible was love, someone that was driven by love, of course Jesus, number one, right, is the man of love. But beyond Jesus, I think of David. His name means beloved, and God calls him a man after his own heart. Fiery, passionate man. He was a man of war, but he was also a man that wrote poetry and these beautiful love songs about the beauty of the Lord. Think about John the Beloved, because he rested his head on God's side, because he calls himself the disciple who Jesus loved, and because he was there at the foot of the cross. I think of Mary of Bethany, because she poured out everything for the sake of love. When I think about people that were driven by love in the Bible, I don't know that Paul is one of the first ones that comes to my mind. Of course we know Paul loves God. I'm not disputing that for a second. Of course he very much loves Jesus. But when I think about Paul as a kind of Bible character, the things I think about are, the zeal, the passion, the conviction, the power that he moves in. This is a fiery, zealous, strong preaching man. But actually, when you read what Paul says, it's that kind of old preacher adage that what comes out of us under pressure is who we really are, right? Character is who you are under trial, under pressure. And this is a heightened season where they're seeing the remarkable power of the Lord, but they're also seeing unprecedented pressure, unprecedented trial. And Paul personally, it's like all of the world is talking about Paul and this Jesus whom he preaches. And for lots of people, they're talking about, it with conviction, and they're cut to the heart, and they're believing in Jesus, and that's beautiful, and that would have been so exciting and moving and amazing for Paul to see God doing this through his life and in his lifetime. But there also were a lot of people talking about Paul, ready to kill him, calling him a heretic, ready to shut him down, trying to stop his ministry. And in that context, what comes out of Paul, there's not very rare, I can't think of an instance in these chapters where we see self-seeking or selfishness or selfish ambition and he's being killed. Like, if there's ever a moment to think about yourself, Paul's lost everything for the sake. He lays down everything for the sake of the gospel. He's calls himself a bondservant in chains. He's moved to tears. His friends are weeping and he says, "Oh, you're breaking my heart. Don't weep for me." But in that context, I don't think Paul is just being humble by not talking about himself. I genuinely don't think the preoccupation of Paul's heart, from the evidence that we have in the scripture, it seems like the thing Paul's thinking about isn't himself. So what is he thinking about? What was Paul's why? What drove Paul? What is the thing that pushed Paul to give everything? The thing that pushed Paul to give everything was love for Jesus. How do I know that? Well, because at every moment he's preaching about the beauty of the Lord, the heart of the Lord. He's preaching with great love and zeal for God. But then he gets arrested in 22 and 23. And I love this moment because he turns around to the captain, this Roman. He turns around to him and he says, hold on. Before you arrest me, before you put me in prison, I know we're in the process, fine, I'm not disputing that, but let me speak to them. And then he speaks. And what does he share? What does he say? He shares his testimony. He turns around to the people that are trying to accuse him, that want him dead, that have made a pact not to eat. In the next chapter, they're going to make a pact not to eat until they kill him. This is the level of hatred. And he turns around to these men and he says, I have to tell you my why. And what comes out of Paul in that moment is, Jesus met me on the road to Damascus. Jesus loved me when I stood back and I watched Stephen be martyred. I stood and I guarded the clothes of the men that were going to kill him, that were in the process of killing him. He not only didn't judge me, he loved me. He came for me. Oh, the love of Jesus. Oh, if you could see the beauty of this man. Paul's why, the thing that drove Paul, was deep beautiful, stunning, compelling love for Jesus. In 2 Corinthians 5, he says, love compels us, not to selfish ambition, not to think about ourselves, but for sold out, all in love for Jesus. And to me, these chapters, that sums up Paul's life. That Paul was driven by great love for Jesus, and it turned the world upside down, but it also turned Paul's life upside down. And yet Paul didn't seem, he counted the cost. He didn't seem, he wasn't ignorant of what was going on, but he doesn't seem moved by himself. He's moved by stunning love for Jesus. And so reading these chapters this week, my question has been, what's my why? What drives me? I hope that encourages you, if you haven't read Acts 22 and 23 and the remarkable things that Paul turns around and he says and he shares, where he shares his testimony. It's stunning. I'd encourage you to read it. I hope you're enjoying doing the book of Acts with us. We love you guys. We're praying for you, and we hope we get to see you soon.